This is the demonstration on how to remove unwanted material from your shot. I'm going to do the telephone wires that we demonstrated in class. So I'm going to go to this folder here. I've got the assets here with the shot. You guys will have this. Ignore this project file. That is not yours. It's mine. In fact, I'm just going to delete it. And you will create your own project file. But here are the assets that you need. You really just need this red footage shot right here. It's the RMD file in there, and ignore this After Effects thing. So really the only thing you need for it is just this folder with the red file inside of it. That is really all you need out of all these folders. If it has all this stuff, just ignore that. In fact, I'm just going to delete it. There we go. So I'm going to start Premiere. Once Premiere starts up, I'm going to do a new project. So you'll save this as your own project. I'm going to browse to the location that I'm saving my project. In this case, I've moved the files that I need to my desktop. So I'm working on a Mac. If you're working on a PC, same thing. You'll go to the desktop where you're working, find your removal folder, select that folder, hit choose, and save your name and make a name for your project. I'll just call this removal project. Normally you wouldn't do a full project just for removing one item, but you would do this within a project. Okay, so now that I've got this open, I'm going to import my footage, double click inside this area, and grab my red footage. I'm just going to grab this file right here, my one red file. Here my Windows machine shut down. Yes, I use Windows as well. Alright, so I've imported this one clip here. So once this footage is imported here, I'm going to grab it and watch the icon that I drag it to. Watch closely. Do not drag it to the folder icon. Drag it to this little teeny piece of paper icon right here. You'll see this little piece of paper icon, new item icon down here. If you drag that to that item right there, right now this is not a timeline right here. Everybody, I see people try to drag this clip in and like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, no, that's not a timeline. That says no sequences. There's no timeline there. New Premiere CC doesn't open up with a timeline, which I actually like because it forces you to set up a timeline based on your clip's settings. So I'm going to grab this red clip, drag it down to this new item icon, and drop it off. Boom. There's a timeline named after the clip. I don't like the timelines to be named after the clips, and neither should you, because everybody should conform and be like me. Yes. So I'm going to select that clip right there. Just select it, press return or the enter key, and suddenly it'll highlight and you can name it. I'll just call this edit sequence or something like that. Whatever you want to name your sequence. You should not have it the same name as your clip. That'll get confusing after a little while. But you see this little icon right here represents a timeline. That one represents a clip. Here's my timeline right there. If you ever lose your timeline like this, you can just double click on your timeline here and it opens it back up. So what we're going to need out of this clip is first thing you're going to do if you're editing this commercial is you're going to need to edit it down to the shots that you need. So I'm going to edit this down. First shot of the commercial is this guy running down the hill right here. So I'm going to get it to the point. By the way, you'll want this on like at least quarter resolution, if not eighth resolution, just to speed this up a bit. I'm going to put on to eighth because I'm working on a crappy computer. So I'm going to get this to the point where I want the edit to begin. About right there when he starts running. I'm going to hit Apple K, Control K on a PC. We'll cut the clip. I'm going to highlight this and Option or Alt on your PC, Alt Delete. And it deletes and it does a ripple delete. So now I've just got, now I'm going to play this through to the point where I want the clip to end, right there. About right there. So he runs down the hill, picks up the rock, and smiles. Then it would actually edit on to the next shot, if you had more shot, if you were editing this full commercial. But we're just doing this one shot right now. So you play through, you basically edit down your sequence to everything that you need in your sequence, so everything's timed out perfectly the way you want it. And then you go through and start doing effects on a clip-by-clip basis. So this clip right here, we've got this issue up here of these telephone wires in the shot. And a caveman and telephone wires don't go together, so we're going to do some removal here. And another issue is the shot is moving, so it's just not an easy composite of simply cropping and pasting and putting trees up here because the shot is moving. It's a dolly shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to find a clip where we can take trees and copy and paste them right here. I'm going to use the same clip. I'm going to double click on the clip again. I'm going to find a clip. Now what you want to do is you want to find a shot of those trees where the you want to find a shot of these trees where the camera is not moving on a dolly, Because what we're going to do is we're going to find that static shot of the trees, but we don't want to do a still frame of it and paste it here. You could, but it wouldn't look as good, as if all the subtleties of the leaves blowing wouldn't really look all that good on a still image, on a still frame that we could cut out and put into this window right there. So we want to find a kind of a static shot where the tripod is not panning, where the camera's not dollying, because we want to use it as still as possible, because we're going to stick it in here and motion track it to this. If you do choose a moving shot and you put it in the frame, if you choose this shot, you're going to see the trees up here moving through the shot as the dolly progresses, and it won't look natural. It'll look like the trees are moving on an escalator. So you want a static shot with the trees blowing. And the best part of this footage that I could find is right here when he walks up to the top of the hill and he stops. If you play through this, you'll notice the camera jiggles a little bit, but we can stabilize that. We just don't want it dulling or panning. Right there is where it stops. I'm going to arrow back a few frames. Right there, I'm going to put an endpoint, play through this. The camera kind of jumps up and down a little bit, but we can stabilize that. And then we play through it and it jiggles a little bit. We can stabilize that. I'm going to put an out point, grab just the video of this clip, drag it down. I'm going to drop it over the top of this other clip right now, just so I can make this last the same time as the clip below it. I want this to last the exact same length. If you send this over and it's too short, you won't have enough tree to cover. Suddenly this spot up here will just go blank if it's too short. So I'm going to grab this clip, drag it out, make it last exactly the same amount of time. So this clip lasts the same, this clip on top of him just standing there, but the kind of a static shot of the trees is there. But then we got just an issue. These trees kind of, you'll notice very subtle here. You'll see the camera just kind of bouncing a teeny bit. You see that if you look up here especially. You see the camera kind of bounce a little bit right there. We want this stabilized. And there's another little camera jump there. We want it all stable so you're not seeing trees bounce. So now now I got these the same length, I can separate these. I'm going to pull, undo that. I'm going to pull this shot, the tree shot that we're going to take and composite. So what we're going to end up doing, I've got these side by side. I've got the actual edited shot here that I need to use. This is the actual edited shot. And then I've got this tree shot. I'm going to cut out these trees from this shot and paste them over into this shot over the wires right here, so it doesn't look like there are wires. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm first going to send this clip here to After Effects and stabilize it so I can then use it for the composite. So the first step I'm recommending is, it doesn't really matter which one you send first, but just as a step I'm going to send this one here first, the tree stabilization, because we do need it stabilized before we actually do the composite. So I'm going to right click on it, replace with After Effects Composition. Make sure After Effects is not open at first so it doesn't add it to a previous project. You're going to create a new project for this specific After Effects project for this entire project. Okay, from Premiere it will open up this window in After Effects asking you to save the project. So I'm going to name this project as an After Effects project. I'm going to save it as Caveman project. I'm going to put it in the removal folder, save it in there with everything else, and save. So it's brought over in After Effects here. If you click on the project tab, it will show you a couple things here. The video clip that it is brought over, the assets that it's using, and then the composition right here. The composition shows this little icon, and the clip that is referencing, that it's using, all the media that it references in that timeline is going to be stored here in your project area. So we've got the if you look at this here, the composition, this represents this timeline or composition down here that has the clip imported. Now I'm going to want to change the name of this to kind of keep track of everything. So I'm going to highlight this composition, hit return, and type in stabilize. So we know this is the clip that we're stabilizing. Stabilize trees, we'll call it. Hit return, and it saved that as the name. Now what we're going to do is stabilize this clip in the timeline here, because you got those little teeny little jumps that it's doing as you play back. You'll notice the camera, as you play back, you'll see the camera kind of bounce up and down up here a little bit and we want a fully stable, locked down shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stabilize this. We're going to go up to, with the clip selected, go up to animation, and you're going to select the warp stabilizer. Select that and it will start tracking immediately. So this will start stabilizing. Up here you'll notice the progress. It'll show the progress up here, how many frames it's doing, and I'll come back when this is done stabilizing, when this is done analyzing. Okay, once it's done analyzing and it's finished, you'll no longer see the progress down here, and you'll see that bar will disappear. A couple things that we want to change here under stabilization. Now we want this image to hold perfectly still. We don't want any movement here. So if you are doing something like a dolly shot and you're just trying to make the dolly shot a bit smoother, you're going to use smooth motion here under stabilization. Otherwise, you're going to pull this down and do no motion because you want this to lock perfectly still. And it'll take a few seconds for it to stabilize, and then it's done. Down here, you can, with this image specifically, you can leave subspace warp on. It really doesn't affect it all that much because there's not much perspective change. As we play through this, you'll notice the trees are locked perfectly. They're not moving. There's no camera jiggle anymore. It's got rid of that jiggle. We play through this a little bit. You'll notice the trees hold perfectly still. So now we've got a good image that we can crop out and put over the wires in the other shot. We're going to use the trees cropped out of this one to composite in the other shot. So we need to send the other shot over. Once again, we're going to do no motion on this, leave it on subspace warp. If you want to see what this is doing, you can do this. You can pull this little thing down and say stabilize only, and it will show you exactly. You'll see up here, you can zoom up on here and play it, and you'll notice the camera jiggles. You can see the black end of the frame. It's moving the image here. You can see this up here barely moving around. You see a little bit of the black frame moving in as it's stabilizing the image. And you can see a little bit over there, up here. So you can see that little black frame. So it's stabilized the image. It's very subtle, but it's done it. So I'm going to turn this back. If you do that, turn this back to stabilize, crop, and auto scale is what it was on by default. And there's our shot. Our stabilized shot. And we're just going to use a little bit of these trees. So I'm going to go back to Premiere. And under Premiere, now I'm going to grab this shot and start working on the composite. I've stabilized this shot, and that's the shot we're going to need over here for the cropping out the trees. But I'm going to take this shot now, and this is the shot that we're going to fix now. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to, with After Effects open, I'm going to replace with After Effects Composition. It'll take it to After Effects. On a PC, it usually doesn't bring up After Effects. You'll just have to tab to After Effects if it doesn't do that. Once it brings it in After Effects here, I'm going to go to my Project tab. Notice it's added basically another copy of the same asset that it's using. And now a timeline here. A new timeline, a new composition for the new clip we're working on. So I'm going to highlight this, select it, and hit Return. And it will highlight this, ready to change the name. I'm going to call this Final Composite. Final composite. So now I know that I have a difference between stabilize the trees. The stabilize the trees one is where I've stabilized the tree effect here in this composition or in this timeline. And then in the other one, I brought over the clip that we're actually going to fix of him, this edit of him running down to the rock. This is the shot, and we're going to now put a tree up here. So now what we're going to do is this stabilized tree timeline up here. I'm actually going to pretend like that's a clip. It's a composition that's been stabilized, but I'm going to treat that like it's an entire clip. Drag it and drop it down into. Make sure, by the way, you have your final composite timeline open. You'll notice there's the stabilized tree one right there and the final composite right there. Actually, I'm just going to close the stabilized tree. I don't need that open anymore. So here's the final composite. I'm going to grab the stabilized trees like it's a clip, drag it, and drop it above this clip right here until that little black line appears above it. Drop it. So now it's on a layer above. So now this thing, if you grab this and move it, you'll notice it's got the stabilized trees over the top of the clip that I want to affect. So if I let go of that, I'm going to undo Apple Z or Control Z on a PC. So now I'm just going to cut out the portion of the trees that I want out of the stabilized tree shot. With this clip selected, actually a pre-comp or a composition, it is selected. I'm going to pretend like it's a clip though. Select it and go up to my pen tool up at the top. G is the shortcut for it. Click on that. I'm going to go out here and find a section of trees that I want to cut out of here on this on this layer. So you're going to click your pen tool somewhere. I want to take kind of this range of trees right here, and I'm going to put it up here and duplicate it, or put them up here out of the stabilized trees clip. So I'm going to click and drag just a little bit to make this a Bezier curve. Click and drag to make it a Bezier curve. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and this should be about enough here. And click on the first point to make it the circle complete, and the mask is completed. Just cut that out of the stabilized tree. Let me turn off the bottom layer so you can see what's going on. Click this little eyeball down here to turn it off. Now it's turned off, and you'll see the top layer. Basically what I've done is just cut a mask out of this here. Made a mask for this stabilized trees, the stable trees layer. So if I turn this one back on, the bottom clip, you can see if I go over and choose my arrow tool, which is V for Victor, you can reach over and grab this layer. You click once to deselect the nodes, and then you click again and drag if you can't get a hold of it. I'm going to drag it kind of over into the area. Basically, this is going to be kind of in this area up here, covering these trees. But right now, the problem is, if we play through this, I'm going to click in here just to deselect everything. First of all, we have this hard edge here. You can see the hard edge, so it doesn't blend in that well, which we're going to fix later. And if I play through this, you'll notice this just sits here while the dolly's moving, so it doesn't look like it's really part of the image. So we're going to have to motion track this portion to the back clip there. So the way we're going to do that is, first of all, I'm going to turn off the stabilized trees just so it's not in my way. I'm going to work here and do some motion tracking points. I'm going to turn that off, hit the eyeball, and now it's gone. So now that clip is invisible, but it's still there, but it's just invisible. And now I'm going to do some motion tracking. But first, before I do that, I know I'm going to use this back video here, this video clip here, to record some motion tracking points. I'm going to put a point on the back of the screen here, and it'll follow a pixel, a range of pixels, and it will follow the movement, and it'll make a motion path based on the movement of this image here. Since I'm putting the trees back here, it's going to have to be kind of even with the movement of this plane of trees back here, because this is kind of a different plane up here that moves at a different speed, and the trees move at a slightly slower speed than the foreground moves. So I'm going to choose kind of a plane back here, and these branches end up being a nice, solid, stable image portion I can select onto and track. But first step is going to be adding what's called a null layer, N-U-L-L. Go up to Layer, hit New, and select a null object. I'll add a null object here as a layer. What this is basically, a null object is basically like a layer with nothing on it. It's something to add information to, like tracking points or keyframes, and then you can attribute several different clips to the. I guess we can link several different clips to the attributes of the null, and then those clips will react according to the attributes that have been saved to the null. So I'm going to go up here. I'm just going to grab this little red square here. This is the null object. It's really just nothing. It's this little red square here. I'm going to move it kind of up into the area that we're going to be tracking, just so we kind of know this belongs to this area up here. If we decide to create more null objects, which we won't on this project. So now I'm going to select the bottom clip, and we're going to add motion tracking points. I'm going to go up to my workspace, pull this down, and tell it to show my motion tracking layout. It will bring up this tracker right here on the side. We were on standard before, but now we're on motion tracking. It doesn't add any functionality to this. It just is a layout that shows different windows. You can open up those windows in standard as well if you know what you're doing, but it's just a quick way of bringing up certain tabs, or certain tabs is by going and arranging it by these types of effects that you're going to be doing. So I've got it right now in motion tracking. What I'm going to do is So now I'm going to go over to the tracker here. And the one that I'm going to do is, this is 3D Camera Track Warp Stabilizer, which we've worked with. I'm going to do Track Motion. And I click on that, and what it does is it opens this layer that I had selected up in a layer tab. This is like basically in Premiere, like double clicking on a clip, and it opens it up in a source window. This is basically what it's doing. It's opening up in its own source window, so you can just look at the clip on a layer level. Your composite tab is over here. There's your composite. There's the clip. It needs to be on the actual layer level to show the tracking point, to do the tracking. And hold down Option or Alt on the PC. I'm going to scroll up with my mouse, and it will zoom up to where my mouse is pointing. Need to make this a little bit bigger just so we can move it easily. Since this is 4K resolution, these tracker points are really small. So I'm going to expand this. This inner point here is what it's going to basically lock to, including this is the frame that it's going to try to lock to, or I mean the pixel that it's going to lock to, and then it will try to read the image around it and try to lock to that image, use it as reference. And this is kind of the outer safe zone here that it's going to allow for a little bit of movement. So you want to keep kind of a static image within this box right here. So I'm going to zoom out by hitting Shift question mark. I'm going to reach inside my tracking point here. Make sure you don't grab the pixel crosshair right there. If you do undo. But you're going to reach into a blank area here, grab this thing, and start moving. You'll know if it's moving because it will zoom up. I'm going to go up to this tree area, and I'm going to attach it around this dark area right here. That ended up being a good tracking point right there on this branch, at the very top of that branch right there. So I kind of want it out of the way of these weeds here, because these weeds kind of cross over in front of it. If they cross in front of that pixel will be blanked out, and you won't be able to, and it will lose the tracking data. It'll track up to the point that something else crosses over it, then it has nothing else to track to. So I'm going to expand this a little bit so it has a little bit more region to play with. Tracking might not be as accurate though if you expand that, but in this instance it should work pretty well. Alright, after I'm done, I'm going to go over to this window here. I've got that laid on a frame. Okay, now I'm going to go down to this little tracker window here. I've got this laid out on a pixel. To kind of see the pixel that I had it on, you can grab this window, drag it around. I'm going to put it right, some kind of high contrast near the edge of something high contrast. Like dark colors near the edge of a light color is really where it is able to track the best. I'm going to come over here, and one thing important, you got to make sure that your motion target is going to be attaching this information that tracks from this shot here. It's going to apply that to the null after you've done the tracking. So make sure this says null 1. If it doesn't, hit edit target, and you're going to choose under layer null 1 and hit OK. Down here I'm going to now start analyzing this clip by telling it to analyze forward. It'll analyze forward into the clip here. So you're going to click that, and you'll notice the motion tracker will start tracking to that point. Hit play, and you'll notice it'll start tracking frame by frame. It's a really slow computer, but if you're on a better computer, it'll do it faster. And you'll notice this is attaching to that point, and it should be following this. If it's not, you probably don't have that layer selected. Okay, so I've let that track all the way to the end here, and you'll see this little tracking path right there. Now that's basically just data. Those are what's called keyframes right there. If you zoom up close to that, you'll see these individual keyframes. It's kind of tracked that. So it's kind of got in this region and followed this branch right there from over here to there. There's the movement of the camera. Shift question mark zooms back out. Shift question mark zooms back out. Now what we're going to do is take that data and we're going to apply it to the null. So that data is recorded onto a null, so we can attach things to that null object. So I'm going to hit apply, and it'll bring up this little thing saying, do you want to apply it to the X and Y axis or X only? Y, you're going to want to apply it to X and Y axis, up and down and left and right. So it uses all the range of movement there. And hit OK. And it has now applied that all to the null, all that information. Let's collapse this clip, go to the null, and I'm going to hit home and go to the beginning of the timeline, play back, and you'll notice the null is now moving and tracking with the background there. So now once we're done, we can attach an object. We can attach the stabilized trees here to that null. I'm going to turn on my stabilized tree now. Turn that on. We'll see the trees pop up. I'm going to go down here and you'll see this little parenting function here of the stabilized tree. I'm going to parent that by doing this what's called a pick whip to the null object. I'm going to grab that and drag it over to the null, highlight the null, see that little path there, let go, and now this clip is parented. Make sure you go to the very beginning of your clip to do this, and to home. And now as we play, you'll notice these trees now move with the background. Let that play through and render. My screen recording and this HD footage and this 4K footage is going to take a little bit of rendering here, but this is starting to render. So I'm going to play that back here, and you'll notice that that moves with the background. It locks onto the background and moves with the background. Now, there's kind of an issue here later on down the line. I'm going to turn this down a quarter resolution so it runs a little faster. You'll notice later on down the line there's a little bit of an issue. These weeds come in front and they cut off because they're behind this layer that I pasted over the top. So you'll notice those weeds there now go behind the clip. So we're going to have to do some changes here. So what I'm going to do is start fine-tuning this now. Now that that is attached, it's tracked, I'm going to highlight the stabilized trees. I'm going to make sure I'm on my arrow tool. I'm going to just grab this and actually move it up so you can see a little bit of the background. It'll make it look like the trees are kind of growing on the hill in the background there. And as this passes by, the weeds pass by, it's still cutting off a little bit, but we're going to do some feathering things here to make this look a little bit better. And this will blend in. This weed here will blend in instead of looking like it's going behind that footage. It'll look like it's in front of it, where it should be in the foreground. So I'm going to select my stabilized trees. I'm going to arrow down. I'm going to go under masks, and you'll see that mask that I created right there. I'm going to arrow down this mask number 1. I'm going to go over to the mask feather. I'm going to grab these pixels here and drag to the right, and you'll notice, watch that as I drag it, you'll notice this is starting to feather and soften the edge of the mask here. So that was way too many pixels. I'm just going to take it to, let me do undo, back to 0. I'm just going to feather this about probably like 50 pixels. And let me deselect and see how that looks. And it's looking pretty, it's blending in a little bit. I'm just going to grab that layer, move it over to the left a little bit, make it try to blend in enough to cover those trees and kind of soften out the edge there, high enough that it will. Now it kind of looks like trees up on the hill back there. Now that I've feathered it a little bit, one thing that you'll notice here, these trees are brighter than these trees here, so I'm going to add a filter to this as well to try to make it blend into these trees a little bit better. So they're not, you'll notice bright here and dark here all of a sudden. So I'm going to go to my workspace, pull this down, and go to Effects. It'll bring up an Effects panel over here. There's my Effects panel. I'm going to click in the search window and type in brightness. Just type in bright. It'll bring up all the filters with the word bright in it. Here's under color correction is brightness and contrast. I'm going to grab that, drag it over, and drop it onto my stabilized trees, onto that set of trees up there. Drop it. It'll bring it up in your effects control panel because I've got this clip selected. I now have this brightness and contrast applied to this clip here. Now I can grab the brightness and drag this down, and you'll notice it starts to darken it. And right about there, it looks like it is matching the trees in the background. Deselect down here by clicking in this region, and now it looks like it's blending in pretty well. It looks like it's part of the background there. So that's almost about it. Now as we play through this, let's watch what happens when these weeds travel in front. It is blocking out a little bit, but that's it's very difficult to notice that. In fact, we could increase the mask feather, maybe drag that up just a teeny bit more. Oops, let me grab my arrow. Maybe about right there, and then those weeds can pass underneath and it doesn't look like they're being blocked out. And as we play through, you'll notice it'll stabilize and look pretty good. Let's play just a little bit about that rendered clip back there. So we've made this look pretty good. Now, one last thing that I want to do, this is just kind of a fine tuning thing here. This whole overall dolly shot is kind of a little bit wobbly in parts. It's just really, really subtle, but I want to make this really smooth, the overall shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these all one shot here that I'm going to apply the stabilize filter to. Instead of having to go through and stabilize this one, and this one, I just want to do it all at once as if it's all one clip. So to make these all act as one clip, I'm going to highlight these 3 layers here down in my composition. I'm going to right click on those and say pre-compose. It's going to collapse or pull all these down into one clip. Pre-compose, it'll come up and say, what do you want to call that one clip? I'm going to call this stabilize final comp. Hit OK. And it will collapse all those into my final composite. Now, if you want to see this, let me go up to my project window here. By the way, if your project window is hidden, go up here to this little bar, drag it over, and there it is right there. It's my project bar. And I actually pull this over to the left side here. I like it on my left side. Oops. Pull this over into the middle. There we go. I've got my project window here on my left side now. But you'll notice if I double click on this composition, this pre-comp that I just created, it'll open it up in this new pre-comp and show the individual layers. So if I need to change something, I still can. But if I go back to my final composite now, it's got those three layers flattened together as if it's one clip inside of my new comp. So it's got a pre-comp there. I'm going to close this window. So now here in my final composite, my last step that I'm going to do is, since it's flattened as kind of one final clip here, I'm going to select that. I'm going to go up to animation. I'm going to kind of smooth out this dolly shot here for the overall clip. I'm going to go to animation, warp stabilizer, and let it analyze. And I'll be back in a minute when this is through analyzing. Okay, the stabilization is done. Now, what you're going to notice over here is when you pull this down, the result here. I want to do smooth motion now because this has a dolly shot to it. I don't want to lock it down and do no motion. It'll lock the shot still and zoom up on it quite a bit. If you do that, you'll notice it will zoom up on it, and then it will try to eliminate the dolly move completely out of this, and it just won't work as well. So I'm going to do smooth motion because I just want it to look smooth as opposed to just locking the shot and holding it still. So now as we play through this, let this render, you'll notice the dolly move, it's smoothed out a bit of the dolly move, just zoomed up about 3%. And we're going to have as a result, we're going to have a really smooth dolly shot. And the trees have been added and removed the wires in the background, telephone wires. And there we go, it's through rendering. This will play back better on faster computers. But there we go, we got a really nice smooth dolly shot. And I'm actually going to go in Premiere and export this out and show you just what the video looks like, just so you see the full result. But there we go, that's locked in the background. The trees are locked in the background. And the trees, if you look ever so subtly here as well, this is just not a still frame. These trees back here, I'm going to hit H for hand and move it back up to this right hand corner. Those trees in the background, see if we can tell. You can see a little bit of mistake in the tracking there, but for the most part it works really well. Depending on what type of part of the trees you got, I can't really tell up here, but you might even be able to see the leaves blowing. So it adds a little bit of motion there, but you can't really tell in that shot, so never mind. But I'm going to export this out of Premiere, so what I'm going to do is go into Premiere. I'm going to save this, Command S or Control S on a PC, save it. I'm going to quit this program. You can go up to the PC and hit the X on the window and close it, or Command Q and quit out. Alt F4 on a window on Windows will quit out of it. Okay, now what I'm left over with here is my stabilized composition that I sent over to After Effects. I really don't even need that. I'm going to highlight it and delete it, and I'm left with my clip here, my After Effects clip here. And this will update. It's taking a long time on my slow machine, but your After Effects, whatever you did in After Effects, will update and change here. Watch for it. I'll wait about an hour and it will suddenly pop up. And there it is, just popped up. The changes popped up. Got the tree there. It's saved in Premiere. Now I'm just going to export this clip out, and then I'll show you the result here. Match sequence settings, just so it exports out a 1920 by 1080 version of this, essentially. I'm going to choose a location. Go to this up. You don't have to export it out. I'm just showing you how this works. You can render it in the timeline if you wish. I'm going to go into that folder and just call it fixed clip. Save that out. Hit export. And I'll come back and show you the video clip when it's done exporting. So I'm going to look at the clip here. Alright, click on this. Play it. I'm going to play it in VLC, so it plays a little bit better. As I play through this, one thing that I will notice as you play through the clip is these trees, especially if you look at it big, is these trees back here. As you look at it closely, these trees are in kind of sharp focus because it was taken from a foreground where things are in better focus than in the background. These are soft. So I'm going to have, one thing I'm going to have to do is also blur these out a little bit. That's one thing I noticed from going full screen and looking at this. So I'm going to go to back to Premiere. I'm going to right click on this clip here and say Edit Original. I don't want to replace with an After Effects composition because it already is an After Effects composition. So I'm going to right click and say Edit Original. It'll open that up in After Effects. So once it's opened up in After Effects, I'm going to go to the Final Composition. I've got to double click on this to access just the tree layer. So I'm going to go back to the tree layer, double click on this. Here it is right there. There's my stabilized tree. I'm going to go to the Gaussian blur. I'm going to type that into effects in here. There it is right there. I'm going to grab it, drag it, and drop it. You can drop it either on this layer here or this layer up here. Either one will apply to that stabilized trees. I'm going to drop it right there. So it's on the stabilized trees. There is my Gaussian blur. I'm going to increase the blur a little bit and try to match it. Let's zoom up on this just to make sure it's kind of matching the blurriness of the background there. There's before. That's with the 0, it's kind of sharp there, so I'm going to just increase that a bit and make it a little bit out of focus in the background. Like 2.3, it looks like we'll do it. And there we go. And that looks like it matches pretty well now. So now you can save that, Command S, Control S, and on a PC, Apple Q, or Alt F4 to quit it on Windows. Go back to Premiere, it'll update, and that'll be changed, and your clip will be finished. Then you can export it out if you wish to take a look at the clip close up and see what it looks like. Then when you're done, make sure you go to your desktop. On the desktop, you will find Minecraft. Open it up and play Minecraft for a couple hours and celebrate. Goodbye.